Institutions, brokers, and communities. The future of crypto trading. Marco Mottana, CFX Advanced. Jane Zavalishina, Cryptology. Jaewoo Seo, Cryptonity. Juwan Lee, NexChange. Moderated by Miko Matsumura, Evercoin.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're down to 15 minutes already, so I'm going to be really time efficient. So we just had these wonderful introductions, so we don't need to further introduce ourselves. What I did want to say is let's get straight into it. So I think the first point I'd like to make is this is really about institutions, brokers, and communities. So when we think about institution, everyone's looking for the Netscape moment, right? So the mindset is consumers. When will consumers adopt? But my idea is that institutions are first and foremost. So we're really going to see institutional adoption, which is going to drive a huge value in the crypto economy. So I guess what I'd love to do is really do something very time efficient, which is I would do a point, counterpoint. So what I'd like to do is just assert that institutions will lead the next wave of cryptocurrency adoption. Anyone want to fight me?
No.
Disagree?
Absolutely.
Sorry. Okay. Agreements are not useful, so let's continue to fight. I'd like to fight further. I'd like to say that that there's no such thing as a security token. So anyone want to fight? Go ahead.
Security token is the future.
Okay, your mic isn't picking up.
Oops. Security tokens are the future, in my opinion.
Okay, so here's the fight. The fight is this, is I have in my pocket a white rock. If I go to any jurisdiction and I say this is a white rock, whiteness is a property of this rock, right? If I go to any jurisdiction and say this token is a security, I'm going to get different answers depending on the jurisdiction. So security tokens aren't a thing. Fight or no fight?
Security tokens means something that you can understand better, and you can have the government with you when you walk forward in the market. And being a security, as we decided to be, for example, in CFX, means to comply with rules, even rules that are not still written sometimes. And,
but I guess what I'm saying is that security is not a property of a token, and I think the juxtaposition of security token and utility token is completely dysfunctional and broken, and I'm super happy to have this concept of VFA, virtual financial asset, because that's actually a schema that is rational. Security versus utility is irrational and broken. Anyone want to fight? Just a comment.
It doesn't matter how rational it is. You know, I once read a book on accounting which had a quote, but you shouldn't confuse the economic sense of things with so-called common sense, right? These are two completely different things. So security token maybe doesn't exist, but as regulation comes, it will, right? And actually, this also, your point that there is no such thing contradicts your previous point. I mean, how do you see institutions coming into the space and actually starting investing?
Yeah, this is
not
a great
ICOs,
fight.
Right? So you're contradicting
This
yourself.
is a great fight. This is a great fight. The thing that I'm saying is I'm saying that indeed security is actually in the eye of the regulator. So the regulator decides what's a security. What I'm actually opposing is the idea that if you have utility, then you cannot be viewed as a security. That is an absolute rubbish perspective, so I want to make sure people don't misunderstand. The reason why I'm ranting about this is because I feel like the industry goes from ditch to ditch. And I think the ditch, they said, we're in the ICO ditch. ICOs are broken, let's
break something else.
Let's correct. And so now we're driving into the STO ditch because we are in danger in the ICO ditch. Go ahead.
But for me, I feel like we are sometimes opposing ICO and STO, for example.
Yes.
Which is completely a nonsense from my point of view.
Thank you. Keep going.
I feel like STO, from the user's perspective, it's the guarantees that they were not having in the ICO. And we are trying to find a way of guaranteeing them some kind of value and users that they can do. But for me, initial coin offering, in its literal sense, it's a project that raises coins for its funding. And I feel like because we've been through a lot of, it was the Far West. Everyone was trying to do its own thing. And now we have a more mature market and users who are willing to have guarantees and some kind of value associated to the token. And I feel like that's why the hype to the upcoming STO is so high, in my opinion.
I agree.
But they are not really contradictory. It's more like a natural selection and evolution from my point of view.
I want to bounce it to Juwan, because I think there's a false dichotomy here, and I think you're onto that.
First of all, I don't think you can have a security token unless you actually had a utility token captivate the minds of the people, right? So really, the ability to not have this kind of Wall Street way or venture capital way of raising money is the reason why we even have this conversation, because the utility token captivated the mind, setting the stage for a security token potential. Having said that, I would also say that adoption happens when people understand. When you look at a utility token, most institutions do not understand, number one, how to value it, how to use it. Entrepreneurs themselves, they talk about it in a white paper, but they have no idea how to execute utility in their system. They can actually run some of these companies that have been floated on an ICO, but they don't know how to make a utility or a token circulate in their system. So what we see is a broken system now, because utility doesn't really work because it's held in the hands of the people that don't know how to make it to work.
I am totally with you, and I think the thing...
I completely disagree.
Yeah,
if you'd like to fight.
And here's the thing. Oh, please, do you want to fight?
Yeah, I don't think the problem is that people don't understand it. I think the problem is that the utility tokens, well, in its normal sense, are actually not investments, right? It's just souvenirs. They are irrelevant for the institutions.
Well,
and that's why it has nothing to do with security
But
tokens.
I think what's broken at this juncture that's fascinating is that the utility tokens generally are not producing any utility.
Yeah.
And therefore, they're
being
unable
misused,
to actually generate
but
any
it doesn't lay
value.
any ground for the security tokens. These are two completely different stories. If
let me give you, can I offer you, so I know this is a very important point, because I think what we've been saying may confuse new people in the room, which is, please try to think about it like this, which is there are tokens that are backed by assets. Those are things, right, that you can buy and sell. Those are assets. There are tokens that are backed by services. Services are things that you can kind of access and use, right? That's a schema that makes sense, right? So when you talk about utility token, you're generally talking about a token that's backed by a service, right? So to me, the reason why I assert that security versus utility is rubbish is that in the United States, where I live, the SEC thinks that every token is a security. Therefore, you can't say utility token, security token. They're all security tokens in the United States. But if you come to another country, so my point is we can't have a good conversation because each of us is from a country where those two things mean something completely wrong, horrible, and different. So in my country, security token means all tokens. So it just results in confusion. Juwan's point, perfect. But the last thing I want to say...
Let me make a point, Miko, which is that it doesn't matter what the interpretation is, that not majority of them aren't working. So I think that's the most important part. It doesn't matter what you call it when it doesn't work.
Great.
So I think one of the important parts of this is that we now have enough facts. I think what happened with this whole ICO boom is that one thing that people did not understand is valuation. What we've had in the last maybe 1 year is price discovery. People now understand when they raise a certain amount of money and the valuation of whatever they thought was going to be very high, the market determined it was really worth almost nothing.
Yeah,
right?
and let me jump.
So
okay.
that's what it
Go
is.
ahead.
It's none of them, hardly any of them work.
Yeah. And here's the great point. The great point is that if you don't have a mechanic, if you don't have value, then it's super hard to have valuation. And if you don't have valuation, then any token can have any value. And you know who wins that game? The one who wins the game are pump and dump groups. Those are the people that win the game when anything can have any value. When you actually have something like a PE ratio or a price target, then the people who win are the people who are deploying capital. The investors win.
I think one of the things that doesn't help to get the sense of utility of a token is because they are all sometimes project related and not industry related as well, you know. So nowadays I'm listening to some projects, for example, in the field of cacao or in some big industries where they are thinking about tokenizing and creating a currency that can help them, you know, trade and everything.
Okay.
And the thing is, if you're from just the project point of view and you say this has an utility only in my platform, in my products, and in my services, it also has a limitation. That's why.
So I think what you're touching on is both the concept of platform and the context of ecosystem, right? Because when you have platform and ecosystem, particularly occupying a vertical industry, then you actually have the ability to deploy more capital because you can create kind of a bigger flow. So I think that's logical. Anyone want to fight about it?
Well, the problem is that everyone is trying to build their own ecosystem.
That's
so how many ecosystems we are going to have?
That's another beautiful
Millions?
point. And everyone's trying to be a platform.
No, so maybe that's actually not a very ecological way of building a project when you try to get everything into your own ecosystem.
So let me do a counter punch, which is I want to say that centralized exchange is hopelessly broken, and nobody should put their coins on centralized exchange. Agree or disagree? Fight?
I disagree. How else you can trade coins on fiat?
Yeah, so that's a very valid point.
Maybe you can mix together the two stuff.
I think that's a valid point. So here's the idea. The idea is everyone with crypto should hold their key, and when they want fiat, they can do the exchange, but don't leave your coins on an exchange. That custody is broken. Let's put it that way.
There should be a hybrid model.
Excellent.
Well, I think you can only have something that's broken that was working, right? So
that's great.
Okay, so I think what we need to have is
it never worked in the first place.
So the trust was never there.
Yes.
If you almost talk to every exchange, they won't tell you publicly, but they have all been hacked, right? So
of course, all exchanges are being hacked.
So where you can only fix something that has been, well, it was never working in the beginning. Yeah. So there had to have been an evolution of 1.2, 1.3, whatever version there is. If that eventually becomes a hybrid, that is one of the solutions. But unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have one solution. We're going to have many solutions.
We'll have many solutions.
Is it unfortunate?
So the market shapes itself.
So with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left, I just wanted to crack open the concept of community. So I'm just going to assert that in the future, incentivization and community will become more important than user base or any kind of a basic valuation model. And I think it hinges on trust. So anybody want to kind of poke, fight, add? Closing comment?
I agree.
No, the notion of community as well has to be defined, I think. From my perspective of community is I feel like we should give more power and involvement to the community into helping exchanges like ours to evolve, to build features that actually fit their needs.
Sure.
That communication channel.
Anyone else? Anyone else want to close?
We are all doing that, so yeah, we are going to a community.
Another stuff is teaching people how to use the systems because there is very low competencies around.
Absolutely. Education. Juwan?
Community is not static. It's always evolving. And what makes a community engage now may not be what makes them engage in the future. So it always has to be changing and evolving. As much as we've seen so far, the only thing that's constant that I've seen in ICO and blockchain world is constant evolution and change.
Yeah,
That's actually a great point. I want to corroborate that. We may end up, right now, all our efforts are to community, but we may actually end up with bringing more retail investors with not really having a community. I mean, when you think about, let's say, bank customers, are they a community? Like ABN AMRO customers, they're not.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point.
May
right?
eventually develop as a blockchain community into just being, well, consumers, investors, whatever, but not really a community.
We're kind of tying together platform, ecosystem, community, and I think these concepts are interrelated. So I think we are describing a future that I think is of interesting value. So what I really wanted to touch on as kind of a closing point is, the thing that becomes super interesting. Someone asked me, should I do an ICO, right? And I basically said, that is a terrible question because it will only lead you to ruin. You cannot answer that question in an intelligent fashion. The question should be, should I incentivize the people and the organizations that are adding value to my ecosystem? Should I incentivize those people, right? And the thing that's great about a trick question like that is there's only one way to answer that, which is if you say, I will not incentivize those people, you're not going to be a functional business in the future because someone else will. Someone else will come along and incentivize the people that are currently adding value to your ecosystem. So I really feel like that's the bottom line, and that leads to a very good place.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.